During their final attack, the Orc Lord had unleashed his tremendous aura with all his remaining strength, which was blocked by none other than the commander, who took the attack head-on, giving Andreas a split second to attack the Orc Lord as his attack was being deflected. The true hero of this battlefield was none other than Commander Dawson, who even in his last moments only thought about defending his kingdom. The Orc Lord then, with a satisfied smile and blood dripping from his mouth, thought how the world was so vast. The Orc Lord then began bleeding extensively from the slash Andreas had left in his body as he claimed how they had fought well and that he had no regrets. In response, Andreas just apologized to him, saying, "I'm sorry, as I would have liked to fight you to the end alone. But there was a man who insisted on taking a swing at you," said Andreas calmly. Suddenly, the Orc Lord fell to the ground as he had lost all his energy. Meanwhile, the undead commander just kept maintaining his stance. Andreas then, glancing towards Commander Dawson, told him that he kept his promise as he stopped the enemy with his own hands. Meanwhile, Commander Dawson, who was now an undead, still kept maintaining his stance, surrounded by all the destruction caused by the war, as Andreas called him the hero of Endeavor. At the same time, in the Biotra fortification, someone yelled, "What, the Orc Lord is dead?" In response, his subordinate exclaimed, "That's right, sir," and told him that apparently they had pretty much destroyed the Orc army, to which the commander asked him how much damage had Endeavor suffered. The subordinate then, bowing his head, claimed that fortunately no serious harm was done to the civilian, but more than half of Endeavor's standing army was lost. Hearing this, made the commander exclaim, "Oh God," while the subordinate continued and told him, also as the result of the Orc Lord's attack, Commander Dawson was slain in battle. Hearing about the death of Commander Dawson immediately shocked the commander, as he had not expected such a thing to happen. He then, with a bewildered expression, questioned the subordinate if he said Dawson. The commander then yelled in frustration about how terrible it was to have lost that man. He then claimed that had he known, he would have rushed to Endeavor to help, even if it meant disobeying the king's orders. Suddenly, someone appeared behind the commander and questioned him if there was something wrong, which immediately startled the commander as he exclaimed. The commander then explained that it seems Endeavor had defeated the Orc army, although it had turned Sir Evan's journey bringing the reinforcements there into a wasted effort. In response, Evan simply told him that it was all right, 'cause if it meant no further casualties, so be it. He then put that topic aside, exclaimed that for them to have won against the Orc Lord, and questioned if Sir Dawson was an aura master by any chance. In response, one of the subordinates claimed no sir, as he was told that it was largely thanks to a pair of mercenaries, which immediately made the commander alert, while the subordinate continued that he heard they were a necromancer and a spirit medium. Listening to the subordinate, Evan pointed out if by spirit medium he meant, to which the subordinate with any hesitation told him yes, and calling him Sir, Evan told him that he believes he was familiar with her himself. The subordinate then told him that she was Eve Millennium's daughter, Luna Pendragon, one of the continent's 10 greatest. Hearing this immediately brought a smile to his face, as he claimed how he never would have thought that he would find the spawn of evil in a place like that, as he was none other than the pure white holy knight Evan von Oran. So he concluded that this too must be the will of God. Witnessing the sudden turn of events, the commander exclaimed, "Oh no," as Sir Evan was an inquisitor of the Holy See who captures and judges black mages. Meanwhile, looking at Evan act like that made the subordinate exclaim, "Huh?" The commander then thought how he didn't have the chance to cover it up since the news arrived so suddenly. The commander then, with a panicked expression, wondered how he never thought he would end up tipping off the heroes of Endeavor like that, further claiming what a blunder it was. Meanwhile, Evan thought how it seemed like it was best if he made haste, as the daughter of Eve Millennium awaits the purification of the light. At the same time, somewhere near the battlefield of the Endeavor Kingdom, Luna asked Andreas why he left in such a hurry, to which Andreas just simply told her that it was because he didn't have much time. Luna then, carving a magic circle with a tree branch on the ground, told him, but they already prepared a ton of meat for them, and completing the magic circle threw the branch away. Andreas then, with an annoyed look, told her that if she wanted meat, he would treat her to plenty after he returned from the Great Forest, hearing which immediately made Luna happy, as she asked him really and told him that it was a promise. In response, Andreas told her that he promised. Then soon Andreas questioned Luna if all the preparations were ready, to which Luna, standing on the huge magical circle where the Orc Lord's corpse was placed, told him yes somewhat. She then began explaining that this was just like the seances Luna performed on him before, except now the effects of the engraving would be permanent. Luna then, looking at the Orc Lord, told Andreas that it wouldn't give him his full power from before he died, but since he was such a strong guy, even just one of his abilities might be very useful. Luna then immediately pointed at the magical circle and told Andreas to stand there and not to erase it, to which Andreas simply agreed to her and told her, all right. Andreas then began to wonder how the Orc Lord could be a tremendous asset if he evolved him into an undead, but since there weren't many opportunities for him to summon the undead, it wouldn't be a bad idea to use him to strengthen himself instead. Andreas then walking towards the magic circle thought that besides who knew, when he might get the chance to meet Luna again. So Andreas decided to go ahead with it. Luna then told Andreas that, oh, by the way, Luna wasn't the one who was going to do the soul engraving. Then closing her eyes, Luna told herself that she would leave it to you. Witnessing this, Andreas was dumbfounded and looked at Luna in confusion as he did not understand what Luna just said. Luna then, without any hesitation, began chanting a spell, Ashim Trogandi Husher, which instantly covered Luna with a mysterious green light which Luna kept channeling mana in the palm of her hands. Suddenly, Luna began emitting the mysterious green mana even more intensely, which instantly covered all the area around her. Witnessing this, Andreas was even more confused as to what was happening as he paid close attention to her. Andreas then, with his eyes wide open in amazement, called out for Luna when suddenly a voice claimed how rare. Luna then, floating in the air, claimed that this was the first time her daughter had called her to help someone instead of killing them. Hearing all this, Andreas, who was already startled, questioned the word daughter and thought how that meant that she was none other than the legendary witch Eve Millennium, who was renowned all over the continent for her powers. Abruptly, Eve in the body of Luna said, "Pray do tell me, boy," and questioned Andreas what he was to Luna. Meanwhile, Andreas, trying to maintain his composure, thought how she was the supreme black mage who turned Luna as strong as a warlock by merely giving her a fraction of her former abilities and answered her stating that he was a friend. Hearing this, Eve pointed out how it was yet another surprise as she had never expected for that girl to make a friend. In response, Andreas just simply told her that, well, it just happened, and gave a small laugh while in the back of his mind he thought how it was mostly by force though. Satisfied by his answer, Eve exclaimed, "Very well," then raising her hand, asked Andreas, "Shall we begin?" and began chanting the spell, Ashruk Samedio Dothab. The spell made the entire magic circle carved by Luna glow, with the same mysterious mana along with the Orc Lord's corpse. Then as Eve kept chanting the spell with her tremendous power, that huge Orc Lord's body began to decay at an incredibly fast pace, and it looked as if his whole energy was being drained by Eve. Watching Eve perform her magic shocked Andreas, as he just stood there completely silent watching Eve intently. Meanwhile, Eve claimed his soul as well. And as the soul gathered on her hands, Eve pointed out that it was another poor child who could only find meaning in existence on the battlefield. So she said perhaps he might be happier in his company instead. Meanwhile, Andreas was bewildered as questioned himself if she was communing with the soul and exclaimed what a strange sight it was. Eve then instantly flew near Andreas and placed her hand on his head, which startled Andreas for a moment. Eve said, "Let me just warn you beforehand." Then, with a look of compassion, Eve told Andreas that this was going to hurt really bad. Andreas then felt the immense pain that Eve just warned him about, but even though he had been warned, this pain was more than he had ever felt. All Andreas could do was scream in pain as the mysterious green mana surrounded the entire area. Even though Andreas kept screaming like crazy, Eve did not stop her soul engraving, as she was well aware that pain was just temporary. Meanwhile, Andreas, clenching his teeth, kept struggling to stay conscious, even though the pain was way more than what he could have handled. Looking at Andreas struggling, Eve could believe that he was still conscious, as they usually fainted on their first time, regardless of how strong they were. But Andreas was not like anyone she met before, as he kept fighting, even though the pain was immense. Suddenly, a burst of light green aura came out from Andreas, which pushed Eve back and made a huge aura-like appearance of the Orc Lord, which indicated that the soul engraving was a success. Eve then, with a slight smile, glanced at Andreas in amazement. Eve then let go of her magic, which startled Andreas for a moment as he fell back to the ground where the magic circle was. Andreas, who had his eyes dripping with tears from the pain he just experienced, just opened his eyes wide open in relief. Andreas then immediately kneeled to the ground as he had exhausted all of his energy, while Eve exclaimed, "Good boy," and told him that it would have been better if he had fainted instead. Andreas then kept kneeling on the ground, fainting with exhaustion, as he claimed that he thought he was going to die. Suddenly, a system notification popped up stating a new skill that was the enemy of all, which was of unique grade and could increase mana recovery rate in combat from 0.1% per enemy up to 1000%, and HP recovery rate in combat would also increase by 200%. Finally, it stated that this skill will be constantly activated in direct proportion to charisma and mental strength. Andreas, then looking at the notification, was shocked as he exclaimed, "What the hell?" as that meant that his mana was unlimited when he was fighting at a war scale. Furthermore, it gave HP recovery too, which was just an outright cheat. Abruptly, Eve, who was patiently watching Andreas, pointed out that from the way he looked, it looked like the engraving was a success, to which Andreas, maintaining his composure, tried to respond. But suddenly Eve noticed something which made her exclaim "oh" in surprise. Then Eve told Andreas to hold still and placed her hand on his chest, which confused Andreas as he did not understand what she was doing. Eve then, with a confused look, claimed how weird it was and questioned how can there still be a space for one more soul, to which Andreas just responded with a "huh." Eve then began to explain that a normal human could only be engraved with one soul per person, but yet in Andreas' case there was still an extra space in him for one more. That explanation shocked Andreas as he questioned himself if that meant that he could get 2 soul engravings. Meanwhile, Eve was still surprised at that and claimed that she had never seen that before. Eve then, looking at Andreas, claimed what a fascinating constitution he had, while Andreas just silently stood there looking at Eve. Andreas then, with an annoyed expression, began reminiscing about the Tower Master and thought how it didn't matter if it was him or her. They kept looking at him like some kind of research subjects. Meanwhile, Eve exclaimed, "Oh my," as Luna was worried about him. So Eve said, "Oh, but I have to excuse myself for today." Andreas then, with respect bowing his head, told Eve, "Thank you very much for the soul engraving," while Eve just looked at him. Then, with a calm voice, Eve told Andreas that Luna had been tormented by loneliness because she was born to a terrible mother. So she requested him to kindly take care of her. In response, Andreas paused for a second looking at Eve, then told her of course, as she was a friend after all. Hearing Andreas's response satisfied Eve. So she simply told her that she was glad to hear that. Eve then, having completed Luna's request, left Luna's body in the care of Andreas, and calling him a boy, told him to stay, well, until they met again, while Andreas just stood there, carrying Luna, grateful for everything Eve had done. As they made their way through forest, Andreas thought to himself, the great forest of Biotra, and with an area comparable to the size of the Empire, the giant forest was an environment more hospitable to other races than to humans. And to find a specific place in that vast, gigantic forest was anything but easy, was what Andreas was thinking, while Luna, pointing and peeking at a random direction, said that her wild instinct said it was that way. Fortunately, thanks to the map he bought from Muriel, he was able to find the place he was looking for without much trouble, and pulled Lena, who was going to the wrong direction, telling it was the other way, while Luna, in a state of shock, exclaimed, and asked it was not that way. Luna asked Andreas how far they were, to which Andreas said about halfway, and further told the sun was almost down, so they should stop for the night and continue tomorrow. They camped for the night and lit a fire to stay warm and to scare away other animals. As the next day came, they continued their search. Soon, hidden among the long vines was the place they were searching for. It lay hidden perfectly among the vines, far from anyone's reach. Seeing that, Luna exclaimed, "Wow," and told it actually existed. Standing in front of it, Luna said that surely no one had ever found it, with it hidden in a place like that. And even if someone did, Luna doubted they would have been able to get in. Hearing Luna say that, Andreas questioned back with her hand resting on her chin. Luna, with a look of surprise, said maybe it's because of being a dragon's tomb, but it looked like there were a lot of things in there. Andreas continued gazing at her, hearing what she had been saying. While Luna continued staring at it, Andreas, in the back of his mind, questioned himself, things, and not just the dragon's corpse. He concluded it could be dangerous and that they should look around first, but was left in a state of shock as he saw Luna slowly entering inside, and he thought how that girl went in without thinking again and hurriedly went inside as he exclaimed, "Damn it," and thought whatever happens, happens. Abruptly, he reached a dark void room, and the system window popped up stating a place where a dragon died. The scream of Krav Maga had been discovered. Seeing that, Andreas exclaimed that it looked like it was the right place and started to move forward as he questioned himself where Luna was. Suddenly, another system window popped up stating entering hidden dungeon, the repeating nightmare. As the bell rang, the children were playing while one asked to give it back while the other said no way and that he should take it back himself if he wanted it. Andreas opened his eyes in a state of shock as it was not what he had expected. He was sitting on the edge of a fountain while the children he heard were playing where one child was chasing the other with a toy. Standing up, he asked himself where this was and looked around the houses and realized the system window said that was a hidden dungeon, but that place looked no different to any normal town street. Suddenly, Andreas heard Luna say, "Buddy," and turned sideways to find Luna standing on a roof of a house trying to contain her excitement as she asked what this place was and told it was shocking as usually dungeons are dark and gloomy, but that place looked fun. After hearing her, Andreas exclaimed, "There you are," and asked if she found anything unusual. Jumping and landing in front of Andreas, she exclaimed, "Yeah," and whispered the people in that town were all ghosts. Hearing Luna, Andreas was left in a state of shock and confusion as he asked, "What?" Glancing at the children's, Andreas asked if she meant everyone there was dead, to which Luna agreed to, and told this was her first time seeing a place like that, while Andreas in the back of his mind was thinking how they came looking for a dragon's corpse, yet they ended up in a ghost town. Looking around, Andreas said he was not sure what that place had to do with the dragon's tomb, so they should investigate first. With excitement, Luna raised her hand telling all right, and it was time to form an investigation team. Looking towards Lua, Andreas said how he thought that they could clear this place just like any other dungeon by destroying its core, but who knows, that place might have something to do with the dragon. Resting her hand on her chest, Luna said to leave it to her. Luna and Andreas started asking around and hoped to find some answers or clues that might help them. Standing in front of the blue mana-infused gate, Luna told it was a dead end just like the other side, while Andreas thought to himself how, as he thought, it was impossible to leave the town. Pointing towards the town, Andreas said they should look around, to which Luna agreed to. Resting his hand on his chin, he said how it was hard to find any clues since they suddenly ended up there, and glanced sideways asking Luna if she remembered anything before, but to his surprise she was not there. As he looked around thinking he had no choice, Luna was cheering with a crowd of people. Looking at her, he thought to himself how of course she got sidetracked. Luna was watching a show where one dressed as a dragon, and the other as a knight who said he would slay him, addressing it as an evil dragon. As Luna continued watching the show with excitement in her eyes, Andreas, who got close to her, asked himself, a show about the dragon, and maybe they would give us some clues. Abruptly, a person greeted him saying, "Hey bro," claiming that he had never seen him before, and asked if he were a mercenary, to which Andreas, glancing back at the person, agreed to it. Raising his finger, he exclaimed, "Too bad," telling he was a bit late if he wanted to join the Fire Dragon Subjugation Squad, for they already left a few days ago. Andreas apologized, saying sorry, and asked what the Fire Dragon Subjugation Squad was, to which the person asked back with a further questioning if he didn't know. Andreas agreed to his question and justified, saying it hadn't been long since he became a mercenary. Drinking his alcohol, the person said maybe it was a good thing he didn't know, for it might have been deadly for a newbie like him. Wiping the alcohol off of his face, he exclaimed, "Perfect," and said they were doing a play about the Fire Dragon Subjugation Squad right behind Andreas, who glanced towards the show. As they continued watching the show, the person told Andreas how a fire dragon had built a lair near that town, and the high priest of Lord Lethe, fearing for his life, had called for an expedition to slay it. Hearing that, Andreas questioned himself by fire dragon. He meant Krav Maga, right? With a shocked look on his face, Andreas said when he said Lord Lethe, and asked if he meant the ancient god. The person exclaimed ancient and asked what he was talking about. He continued saying Lord Lethe was their town's guardian deity, and that was why before the squad departed, they received his blessing as well. Andreas was surprised hearing what the other person just said, so he asked himself about Lethe's blessing for a dragon-slaying expedition, and could it be that this town was a place that existed in the ancient age? Hidden dungeons were often associated with ancient ruins, so there was a high chance that this place was one of them. The person continued saying to give it a few more days, and they should hear news from the expedition, and no matter how strong the dragon was, they were accompanied by 3 knights of a great warrior level. As they watched the dragon show, the knight pierced onto the dragon, who told what a shame it was to be defeated by a human. He told them they had Lord Lethe's blessing as well, so it was pretty much a done deal. Clapping and crying, Luna said that it was super moving, and it was the first time Luna had ever seen a play. Seeing how Luna was reacting, Andreas was left in a state of shock. Making his way out of there, the person said to Andreas that he might have missed out on joining the expedition, but he might as well enjoy himself now that he was there, to which Andreas agreed to and thanked him. Reminiscing about the system window, Andreas thought to himself how dragons choose a place to die and spend their remaining life there. Such a place is called Dragon Mount. In the messages he got when he entered the dungeon, he felt something off when he saw the phrase, "a place where a dragon died." But it didn't make sense if the expedition was successful. All of a sudden, Luna turned to Andreas saying it was fun, but was left in a state of shock as she exclaimed the investigation, which she had totally forgotten about. Andreas said to Luna it was getting late that day, so they should find a place to stay, to which Luna, trying to contain her excitement, told that they should get some dinner as well, for Luna was exhausted from all the investigation. As they made their way, Andreas asked Luna if this was really her first time seeing a play, to which Luna agreed and said she was always being chased, so he had never seen one before. Andreas further asked, chased by who? All of a sudden, they halted as a person stood before them as if he was waiting for them. The person addressed Luna Pendragon and Barry Sanders and exclaimed nice as they were left in a state of shock because they were not expecting someone who knew them to appear in front of them. More than that, he knew Andreas's made-up name as well. With a serious look on his face, the man asked them what they were doing there. Andreas was still trying to comprehend how he came there, and with a nervous look on his face as sweat dripped, he asked himself that man, could he be, but without getting to finish his thought, Luna, who was grinding her teeth with anger, abruptly asked why he was here with anger in her eyes. Seeing Luna ask him as if she knew him, he exclaimed, Luna. As they both maintained their fighting stance, Andreas thought to himself how he remembered that man also had some history with Luna since he was a nemesis of Eve Millennium, one of the greatest and a natural enemy of black mages. Evan von Oran. With his hands on his waist, he addressed Luna Pendragon, claiming she had grown up and asked her how many years had it been. With anger in her eyes, Luna yelled to Evan to not talk to her so casually and that she hated him. Evan replied back saying how cold while Andreas started to unsheath his sword and Luna raised her weapon, maintaining her fighting stance. Glancing towards Andreas and Luna, Evan started saying about how when he heard about them on the Endeavor and asked if they knew the trouble he went through. Andreas, with a worried look on his face, thought to himself how he thought it wouldn't cause a problem if he were the only one hiding his identity, but never would he have thought someone as dangerous as him would show up there. Evan said that aside and ordered them to tell him what exactly was going on there. As Andreas and Luna maintained their fighting stance, black smoke started to appear out of nowhere. Soon, the people that were standing there had started to vanish, covered in the black smoke. Abruptly, Luna along with Andreas both turned back and Andreas told them that the people were turning into smoke. Evan swung his sword down and Luna and Andreas both turned towards him while Evan started saying how it appeared to be a rather special kind of magic, but it didn't matter, and his sword started to glow and emit light which started to engulf the dark smoke as he said he was only there to purge them black mages and then leave that place. Seeing that, Andreas was shocked as he realized one thing. The light was erasing the black smoke. All of a sudden, Evan, with eyes glowing with the determination to purge Andreas and Luna, who were black mages, leaped forward towards them. Without holding back, Andreas also raised his sword and leaped towards Evan, but to his surprise, he was no match for him as his hand was easily sliced, and he was looking right at it, his decapitated hand still holding the sword. Evan had landed behind Andreas after slicing his hand while Luna, as she dodged away from Evan, was looking at Andreas and couldn't believe it. Abruptly, Luna, with anger in her eyes as she just saw her only friend got hurt, drew back her weapon and leaped towards Evan yelling Andreas, but was stopped by Evan easily as he punched her really hard with his other hand. She was no match for him either. Tears started to drop from her eyes as she realized she wouldn't be able to save Andreas, her only friend, and that they were both done for. Luna was sent flying by the punch that Evan had just landed, and he gazed at her as he held his sword forward. Andreas, holding his decapitated hand, called out Luna, while Luna called him back, addressing his name Andreas. But without being able to say anything further, he was pierced by Evan's sword right between the chest. He was not anticipating that. That was the moment he felt the most helpless. Evan came beside him and whispered how he saw that Barry Nice was just his alias while Andreas, who was still in a state of shock, thought to himself how he couldn't see that at all and asked himself if he was going to die there. After Andreas was stabbed in the back by Evan von Oran, he was immediately sent to a place which was full of darkness. After some time, two white glowing eyes appeared in the darkness, and a mysterious voice stated that it was unsightly. Even the teeth of the mysterious person started to appear in the dark like the person was sitting upside down. Abruptly, in a serious tone, the person started stating how not only Andreas was deceived by the sham of a phony god. Before completing the sentence, the face of the mysterious person was seen as he looked terrifying as ever with sharp teeth and a devilish-looking face. He continued stating how Andreas also got himself killed by a mere human being. Suddenly, Andreas was hanging upside down, as he seemed unconscious, but the mysterious person was sitting down taking a good look at him. He then told Andreas that his weakness was just baffling. Andreas then slowly started opening his eyes. He was slowly gaining his consciousness as he asked the mysterious person who he was. The mysterious person started laughing as he questioned Andreas if he still had the energy to act strong. The mysterious person in a serious way said, "Let's see if he will ever get out of there." The person was looking at Andreas in a terrifying way with his head upside down, but then he slowly took out Andreas's hand and sword which Evan von Oran had cut off and told him that he had forgotten something. Suddenly, Andreas had blood all over the place that he was stabbed, as it seemed like he was getting teleported into a different place this time, but the whole situation made Andreas bewildered. He was immediately teleported to a place which looked familiar to him. He looked terrified about the things he had experienced, but he was trying his best to catch his breath. Andreas then heard a voice shouting to give it back, but then another voice replied shouting to take it back himself if he wanted it. This reply brought a sudden change in his expression, as it looked like he realized something. Andreas was sitting calmly next to a pond, as the voices that he was hearing just now were two kids playing with each other. As he got up from the fountain, he carefully looked at the kids, as one of them was holding a toy, and the other was trying to get that toy back. He then looked at the town, which was full of people doing their usual things, which made him ask himself if he looped back. Abruptly, a system notification popped up which stated entering hidden dungeon, the repeating nightmare. This notification brought a concerned look on his face, as he thought to himself that this meant the time in this dungeon would repeat over and over again. Suddenly, someone started running towards Andreas at a fast pace, calling him buddy. It was none other than Luna herself, who quickly hugged Andreas as she stated how thankful she was. She continued stating how she didn't know what she would do if he wasn't there. Without wasting any time, Andreas told her that he was glad that she was safe, and also asked her if she remembered what had happened. Luna then started crying as she replied how Luna didn't know anything either. She tried to remember what happened to her. She told Andreas that after Evan von Oran hit her down, a mist appeared, and after that she couldn't remember anything. Hearing what she just said made Andreas think to himself that it meant she didn't die and come back to life again like he did, but Luna continued stating that after Luna woke up, Luna was right back where Luna started. Luna then stated that when Luna looked around to be sure, Luna suddenly found him, but Andreas, on the other hand, was still thinking about the black mist being a suspicious thing. Andreas also was wondering about the mysterious voice he heard when Evan had got him. Andreas then looked at the people in the town and told Luna how it seemed to him that the town they were in repeated the same day over and over again, to which Luna quickly asked him if that was really true. Andreas agreed to her as he continued stating that although the people there didn't seem to realize it might be due to some kind of magic, but at the end of the day, the two of them seemed to be the only ones who had looped back with their own memories intact. Luna quickly repeated the words by the end and asked him if he meant that they were going to die, to which Andreas replied, perhaps, or maybe when the clock strikes midnight. Andreas and Luna suddenly glanced at someone who was approaching them. Andreas told her how the person approaching them was there even though he was not dead, and in a joking manner asked her how it sure gave her the creeps thinking about it. The person approaching them was none other than Evan von Oran himself. He slowly walked up to them, stating how this was the place that was outside of God's providence. With a serious look on his face, he stated how the place needed to be purged soon. But Andreas and Luna didn't waste any time. They both quickly grabbed their weapons as they looked ready for another fight, but this time Evan was not approaching them with an intent to kill. Evan told them that there was no need for them to be so guarded. Then, in a serious tone, Evan told them that if he really intended to kill them, he would have done so already. Luna was angry about the whole situation, so she sternly told him that he was the one who attacked them out of the blue earlier, but Andreas slowly put his sword back. Andreas then asked Evan if, in other words, he wanted a truce until they got out of there, but Evan, in a serious tone, replied how for an impure individual, he sure caught on quickly. With determination in his eyes, Andreas told him that they should all investigate the town, and when the day started over, they should meet at the exact location to share the information, but Luna was hesitant about teaming up with a guy, so she in a small tone tried to remind Andreas who he really was. Evan stood firmly in front of the two of them and sternly told him that he was quite the schemer. Andreas calmly asked him what he meant by that, but on the other hand, Luna was still furiously looking at Evan. Then, with a serious look on his face, Evan asked the two of them how he could be sure they would share all the information with him. He further questioned them that if they found a way out, wouldn't the two of them escape on their own, leaving him stranded? Hearing this brought a cunning look on Andreas's face as he sarcastically stated how if that was the case, he wished he would have been a little more civil when they first met, and further stated how they couldn't help being comfortable around him. But at the same time, Andreas was thinking to himself how he wished Evan had turned a deaf ear to that. Evan quickly replied back, stating that Andreas seemed to have misunderstood something. Then, with a serious look on his face, he told them that if he wanted to, he could turn the both of them into a bloody mess every day the moment they opened their eyes. Listening to what Evan just said suddenly brought a change in their expression, as they both looked terrified for their life. Andreas then in a worried manner replied back to Evan, stating how he understood and they should definitely work together. He continued stating that he had never expected that his word would get through to a muscle-headed knight like him, but he sure was a stubborn man. Meanwhile, hearing what Andreas just said made Luna even more frustrated, so she told Andreas not to do it. But Andreas further told Yvonne that if he had any doubts, he could have just followed the one of them when they split up. Andreas then told him how he was sure it was easy for Evan to hide his presence, but listening to this brought no change in his expressions. Yvonne suddenly turned back from them and stated that he will just wait and see for now. He then slowly started walking away from them, further telling them how he hoped they would get some results. Andreas was watching him leave silently, but Luna seemed happy to watch him leave. Andreas, with a worried look on his face, wondered how he thought Yvonne was going to attack them again, but Luna raised her middle finger and told Yvonne to screw himself. Then, in a serious tone, Andreas told Luna that they had to find a way out of there before Yvonne does. As they started walking down the street, Luna, with a displeased look on her face, told him how Luna hated that guy, to which Andreas replied to her how at the moment they had no choice but to ally with him. As they continued walking, Luna asked Andreas as to where they were going. Andreas then replied to her that he remembered this place as he had already passed it yesterday. He continued stating how he heard that the high priest of Lethe had asked to slay the dragon, but as the two of them were walking towards a building which was guarded by soldiers, suddenly, Yvonne appeared right behind them as he told them that have come to the cathedral to investigate. As soon as they heard his voice, they both quickly glanced back at him, but Yvonne continued stating that perhaps they should have agreed on where to investigate first. In a stern voice, Yvonne told them that this made it pointless for them to split up to investigate. But Andreas quickly replied to him how they had also thought the cathedral was the most suspicious place, but Luna told Andreas that Yvonne was doing nothing but tailing them. Then, in a stern voice, she told Yvonne that the ones who will be doing the investigating here were Luna and Buddy, so he should go away from there. Suddenly, one of the soldiers guarding the door of the cathedral asked Luna if she was the priestess of Nyx, but Luna had a surprised look on her as she didn't know what the soldier was talking about. Before Luna said anything, Andreas immediately closed her mouth with his hand and answered back to the soldier. He told the soldier that he was right about Luna being the priestess of Nyx. Even Yvonne looked confused about what was going on there. The soldier then asked Luna if she was there to meet their own high priest. Andreas, who was still keeping Luna's mouth shut, told the soldier yes and asked him if they were allowed to meet him now. But the soldier apologized to Andreas, further telling him no visitors other than members of the church were allowed to meet him. He politely asked Luna if they could have her escorts wait there for a moment. With a look of confusion, Luna in a small tone asked Andreas if Luna should play along with this drama, to which Andreas whispered back at her that she should go inside and see what kind of person the high priest was. As Luna was going inside the door of the cathedral, Andreas thought to himself how those gatekeepers even had the same eyes as Luna's. Thinking about that, he asked himself what kind of connection does a priestess of Nyx have with Luna. Suddenly, breaking his thought process, Yvonne told Andreas how black mages like them sure were masters at telling lies, but listening to this brought a displeased look on Andreas's face. Andreas sternly told Yvonne to stop picking fights in a situation like this, but Yvonne replied back to him stating how it was meant as a compliment, further stating that he will pick his words better next time. He continued stating that as soon as they left the place, he will fulfill his duties as a member of the Inquisition, and he regretted that he couldn't purge Luna and her mother with his own hands. Listening to this brought a displeased look on Andreas's face as he stated that he doesn't mean to argue with him about his duties. Then, with a smirk on his face, he stated how he thought compared to a homicidal maniac stalking a child in a desperate attempt to kill her, a lying black mage was far better than that. Hearing what Andreas just said made Yvonne furious, as he in a serious manner told Andreas that it was a sacrilege to God. Suddenly, there was a huge bang from inside the cathedral, which left both the doors open. Andreas was in a state of bewilderment, as he was worried about Luna. With a worried look on his face, he quickly glanced back to see what had happened, but at the same time, Yvonne looked calm as ever. Without wasting any time, Andreas quickly ran towards the door of the cathedral with his hand on his sword as he yelled Luna. But the two gatekeepers immediately got their knives out and sternly warned Andreas to stand back. Both of them had an angry look on their faces as they told him that outsiders were not allowed inside. Suddenly, Andreas started approaching them at an incredible pace, but his eyes were glowing red as well. Then, in a stern voice, Andreas told the soldiers to move aside, but at the same time, the face of the Orc Lord appeared out of nowhere. After witnessing the face of the Orc Lord behind Andreas's back, both the gatekeepers started acting in a weird way. One of them was scared for his life, while the other one looked as if he was possessed by something. Andreas quickly moved past the gatekeepers, as they both couldn't do anything to stop him. As he got inside the door of the cathedral, Andreas questioned himself as to what was happening there. Inside the church, someone was using the weapon to cast magic, and a dark, swirling smoke poured from it. The heavy black aura filled the space, making the air thick and suffocating. The intense energy radiating from the weapon turned the once sacred church into a place of pure dread. Andreas rushed into the church and stopped in his tracks. His eyes widened in shock, and his face showed both amazement and fear as he stared at the dark magic filling the air. In front of Andreas, Luna was dodging the waves of black magic radiating from the weapon. The dark aura had spread throughout the church, twisting and curling around everything. Without hesitation, Andreas moved toward Luna, determined to help her. The black aura covered everything, growing stronger with each passing moment. Luna struggled to dodge the magic, her movements quick and frantic. With determination, she braced herself, ready to strike back with her weapon. Suddenly, Andreas placed his right hand on Luna's back. Luna, caught off guard, had no idea who was behind her. Simultaneously, Andreas then glancing at Luna questioned her if she was all right, to which Luna with a surprised expression exclaimed, "It's you, buddy?" Luna then looking at the cloud of smoke claimed that it seemed that they got to the right place, while Andreas kept observing the surroundings. Suddenly, an old man with an annoyed expression yelled at them, calling them filthy infidels. The old man then furiously pointing his wand towards them questioned them just how they sneaked into that holy town ruled by Lady Lethe and commanded them to leave at once. Meanwhile, Luna leaning towards Andreas called him buddy and told him that Guy was a living human being, to which Andreas just looked at her in surprise. Instantly, Andreas with a serious expression exclaimed, "I see. So it was you," and claimed that he was the one who messed with the town's time. In response, the old man looking at Andreas yelled nonsense as he had no such power. Then, without any hesitation like a maniac, the old man told him that was all thanks to the power of Lady Lethe and commanded them to praise Lady Lethe for she had given them eternal life. Witnessing all this, Evan the Holy Knight began walking forward as he exclaimed, "So?" Evan then with a serious tone questioned the old man if he was saying that all that black fog was the work of God, to which the old man just questioned, "Black fog?" The old man then began laughing like a manica and told them that these were the signs of her holiness that appeared upon them when they received her blessings, furthermore claiming that it was proof of a miracle. In response, Evan with a cold look told him that God meant light and that God would never have created something as dark and evil as those. Hearing his words angered the old man greatly, making him yell, "Such sacrilege," and questioning him, "Evil you said?" But without letting him complete, Evan told him that it was him who was committing sacrilege against God, while Andreas calmly called Evan and told him that they had to get some information out of him first. The old man then told them to say what they want, but he would not yield that town to them. While all three of them just looked at him in confusion, the old man then continued and told them that even if it all started because of his mistake, in the end, it was also thanks to me that they were still alive. Hearing that, all three of them kept staring at the old man with confused expressions. After saying all that he wanted, the old man pointed his own staff towards his own neck, ready to kill himself instantly. Then, with a cunning smile, the old man claimed that there was nothing they could do, and began channeling mana in his wand. Witnessing this, Andreas immediately understood what he was planning, and with his eyes wide open in shock, he exclaimed, "It can't be." He was going. But the old man, without any hesitation, launched his attack, aimed at his neck, and blew his own head off, which made his blood splash all around, killing his own life. Then Luna, examining his dead body, claimed that it was too late. Luna then glanced at Andreas and told him that his soul was already gone, and that there was nothing left. She then exclaimed that they couldn't learn anything like that. Andreas then, with a curious look, questioned Luna if that meant his soul had already looped back. Then Evan, looking at Andreas and Luna, told them that the old man said that the people here were still alive because of him. Furthermore, it seems that Priest was the reason why time was repeating itself in that town, to which Luna, with an annoyed expression, claimed that they knew that. Evan then, with a serious look, said, however, they had no clue how he managed to do that. Evan then pointed out that it was delusional to think that it was the work of God, but turning back time was indeed something transcendental, yet he could see that man capable of doing such a thing. So Evan claimed that there must be some kind of special instrument or substance involved somewhere. Andreas then pointed out that it was most likely the dungeon core, but claimed that they lacked the clue to locate it. Luna then questioned Android what to do then, further asking if they want to try looking somewhere they hadn't been yet, to which Evan told her no, and claimed that it was just a waste of time. Hearing his statement, Luna turned towards Evan with a puzzled expression. Evan then placed his sword on his neck and claimed that it would be faster to loop back, capture that man alive, and get the information out of him. Eva then said until later and immediately slashed his own neck. Witnessing Evan slash his own neck without any hesitation shocked not just Andreas, but Luna too, who just looked at Evan in bewilderment. After that moment, silence filled the room as Andreas and Luna looked around at both their dead bodies. Andreas then began to wonder how waiting until nightfall would definitely be a waste of time, but claimed that Evan was way too reckless. Meanwhile, Luna claimed how that was satisfying to see, but was also annoying. Luna then, taking her weapon out, glanced at Andreas, exclaiming, "Well," and asked him if they should do it too, while Andreas, with a concerned look, just wondered in the back of his mind what she was so eager to do it. Andreas then, with a concerned look, suggested to her that they should look around the church a bit more for now, while in the back of his mind he thought how this girl seriously didn't think at all. Furthermore, he claimed that they have to find more information than Evan after all. Luna understood what Andreas meant and immediately gave a look of astonishment, claiming that Buddy was a genius. So they began looking for clues all around the church throughout the day. Then, as they searched for any clues outside, Andreas claimed that they were not getting any leads at all, to which Luna told him to not worry, as they could always try searching again tomorrow after Evan dies. Andreas then told Luna, but he couldn't keep doing this forever, to which Luna, with a surprised expression, exclaimed, "Huh?" and asked him why not, as time just kept looping back there anyway. In response, Andreas told her that they had no idea how time worked outside that dungeon, to which Luna questioned him, "Does it matter?" Andreas then turned back and told Luna that it was because outside that dungeon, he had people he wanted to protect. Luna, hearing Andreas' statement, instantly began staring at with amazement, as he had not expected him to say something like that. Suddenly, the black fog began to surround them, while Andreas claimed how the black fog had appeared, to which Luna agreed, saying, so both of them bid their farewell, as Andreas told her later Luna, to which Luna told him later Buddy. Simultaneously, all of them got respawned once again, and this time they knew what they needed to do. So, without any hesitation, all of them began running towards the church, determined to find a priest. Amidst their running, Luna, with an excited expression, told Andreas that Luna would definitely catch him for him Buddy, while Andreas just looked at her in confusion. Instantly, they reached the church, but what they saw was not something that they had expected, as both the guards had been killed. Luna then exclaimed, "The guards." Then both Andreas and Luna began looking at their dead bodies, as Andreas questioned if that was Evan's doing. So, without any delays, they began walking inside the church to see what happened there. Inside the church, they saw Evan standing as the old man's dead body was lying on the ground. Instantly, Luna yelled at Evan G's and questioned him why he killed him without getting any information from him. Meanwhile, Andreas began wondering if that old man killed himself before we had a chance to show up, now that he knew they were there. At the same time, Luna kept yelling at Evan, telling him that he shouldn't act without thinking like that, while Andreas turned towards Luna. Andreas then, looking at Luna, told her that it was not Evan's doing, which immediately startled Luna, making her question, "Really?" Evan then, reaching for his sword, claimed that it appeared like this was going to be a drawn-out fight and exclaiming, well, then slashed his own neck. Meanwhile, Luna and Andreas just kept staring at Evan as he slashed his own throat. Andreas then began to wonder if he planned to drag this out until either side breaks, while Luna claims that guy went first again. Meanwhile, Andreas kept wondering how that was certainly the simplest way to approach that, and concluded that he didn't exactly have the luxury of time either. So, grabbing his own sword, Andreas called for Luna and told her as much as he would like to find a smarter way to do that. Then suggested let's do it as it was the fastest way for now, to which Luna immediately agreed. So they once again bid their farewell, telling each other that they would see you later and kill themselves. After that, they went through many loops doing the same thing that was killing themselves. It continued 3 times, 10 times, 47 times, 83 times. All of them were frustrated from the situation where they had to kill themselves again and again, but to no avail. Then after 120 times, Andreas stopped counting. Andreas then, with a look of despair, thought how no matter how many times he looped back, he could never get used to the uncomfortable feeling of killing himself. Meanwhile, Luna kept a close eye on Andreas. The fact that the situation remained the same no matter how many times he looped back filled him with frustration and impatience. Then, thinking about the Manica priest, he thought how those feelings only grew worse the more he didn't know how much time had passed outside the dungeon. Then, reminiscing about all the things that had happened and the people who were against him and the ones that were with him, he thought how even though the end of the deadly sins grew closer and closer, and yet he was not there, which filled him with frustration and restlessness. Then after all that madness, they looped back again, where they once again found the priest dead, but this time there was a message written with blood that said, You're trapped, and there is nothing you could do about it. Evan then, looking at the message, told them that he was completely playing with them, as he even tore off his own arm just to provoke them. Witnessing this madness, Andreas could not hold back his anger anymore, and began clenching his teeth in frustration as he yelled, "You piece of shit," and launched a fierce slash from his sword towards the direction of the dead priest's body, which cut the body into two halves and even damaged the statue that left bewildered both Evan and Luna, as they had not expected that reaction from Andreas. Then, as Andreas was on a full-on rage, he yelled "damn it" and questioned what he should do, while Evan kept silently staring at Andreas. Suddenly, out of nowhere, Luna rushed towards Andreas and hugged him, which immediately diffused Andreas' anger, making him confused and dumbfounded. Meanwhile, Luna, who could not see Andreas angry, kept hugging Andreas and told him that today, let's stop killing ourselves. Hearing this, Andreas, along with Evan, just silently stood still, while Luna kept hugging Andreas, even though he had calmed down.